How big of an impact will the inevitable Jalen Hurts contract extension have an impact on the Philadelphia Eagles roster? Find out all that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in, everyone, to another edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Thank you for joining Locked On Eagles for your first listen each and every day, whether this is your first or 101st episode. Thank you for tuning in for free on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube as well. I am your host, Gino Camilleri. You can find me on Twitter at GC24_football. I am the host of the only daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast for 6 seasons running, bringing you Eagles news, insights, and opinions Monday through Friday on Locked On Eagles. You can find my co-host as well at DiBiase on Twitter. And this episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel Sportsbook is the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. And with the inevitable contract extension of Jalen Hurts coming up for 2023, how is that going to impact the free agent class that has some big names that just played a huge impact in this unbelievable Super Bowl season? Who will feel the trickle-down effects now that Hurts is going to take up a large majority of their cap space? And how can Howie Roseman once again maneuver through another difficult free agent window where he isn't going to have the most amount of money to spend? Well, we have to start first with the belle of the ball, with the one guy that everybody wants to know, how much is he going to be worth? QB1, Jalen Hurts, coming off arguably what is the best performance in a Super Bowl by a losing quarterback. Travis Kelce, brother of Jason, who won the Super Bowl, said that Jalen Hurts should have had a chance to win the MVP, even in a losing performance. Look at what he did with his arm. Look at what he did with his legs. He accounted for 4 of those total touchdowns. He was on one, to say the least. And what is he going to be worth moving forward? Well, I think you have to backtrack a little bit before you sign on the dotted line. What are all the variables that are playing into this Jalen Hurts contract extension? Well, it's not just the quarterbacks that are going to sign this year or next year. It's the ones that have signed before him and the market that is currently set up with some of the deals that have been put in place. And if you're going to try and start to find let's say a floor for this Jalen Hurts deal, I think you have to look at the deals that have already been delved out over the last couple seasons. I went on over the cap. I went through the deals that have already been signed, and I looked at Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen, because those 4 individuals already have contract extensions. The extensions that are yet to come from the 2023 free agents, well, you have Jalen Hurts, who after this year doesn't have that first year part of his contract because he was a second-round pick. He doesn't have the 5th-year option. They have to go and extend him now. And if they want it to be cheaper before Lamar, Daniel Jones, Baker Mayfield, who will probably be the next guy in line to get a deal there, even in 2024, it's going to be worse. With Joe Burrow, Tua, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence won't be too far behind. You have to get this deal done now. So let's look at the guys that have already signed. Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. Kyler Murray signed for 5 years starting in 2024. Deshaun signed for 4 years starting in 2023. Mahomes, that 10-year ludicrous contract that he has, and Josh Allen for 6 years starting in 2023. Nobody is making more than Kyler Murray at $46.1 million per year. When it comes to guaranteed money, though, Deshaun Watson is making a whopping $230 million, which accounts for the entirety of his contract with the Cleveland Browns. The biggest cap number, though, is Patrick Mahomes in the year 2027 at $59.95 million against the cap. So if you're looking at those numbers, let's just say Jalen Hurts starts at $50 million. And that's the number they come to. Well, it'll be more per year than Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen, who have already set the bar for what those quarterbacks should expect to get moving forward. If you expect him to be in that $50 million range, you would have to expect that highest cap hit would probably be close to the rest of these individuals, where Kyler Murray, the highest, is $55.5 million. Deshaun Watson's $54.993 million. Josh Allen's $51.27. So let's say it's $57.5 million against the cap. You get him at $50 million per year, and you want to sign him for, let's say, 6 years. So in total, you're going to pay him $300 million in a 6-year extension. You're going to pay him $50 million per the 6 years. Let's say you guarantee him $180 million. It's less than Deshaun Watson, but it's more than the other three individuals in that category. So if he's getting $57.5 million against the cap counted towards his contract, what does that account for? Well, let's say if you take history, since 2013, if you were to extrapolate it to this year, the cap has gone up $70 million. $100 million has gone up $70 million in the past 7 years. So it's gone up around $10 million per year in the last 10 years. Let's say it continues that trajectory. 7 years down the road from this Jalen Hurts contract extension, it will be the year 2030. Jalen Hurts will have made that $300 million. At that time, he will be 32 years old, and his cap hit will not have accounted for more than $57.5 million. So the most that 57.5 would count for on the cap would be a grand total of around 25% in that first year in 2024. If the cap is at around $235 million next year, it'll be around 24 to 25% of the cap. That's a astronomical number, going up from around just over 2% where Jalen Hurts is now. What does that mean? It means that they're going to have to get creative with the salary cap. And who else is the better suited to do it than Howie Roseman, who has gotten out of scenarios and even extended a former quote-unquote franchise quarterback to a deal under a half a decade ago, and he had to maneuver through that window as well. So how is he going to do it this go-around? Well, it's going to start with the impact on the 2023 free agency window, and that's what we will talk about when we come back. But before we do that, this episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Built Bar. If you haven't tried Built Bar yet, what are you waiting for? This is our 6th season with Lou and I doing this here at Locked On Eagles, and every single year, Built Bar has been right by our side. You could only get them at Built.com for the longest time, but today you could go to your local Walmart where you could get the 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. Or if you have a Sam's Club membership, you could go and grab the 13-bar box with the flavors of brownie batter and churro. I have a package of churro coming in the mail relatively soon. I can't wait for them to come in. They're 100% real chocolate. They don't taste like those fake chalky ones you get at the gas station. They are delicious and nutritious. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein. Where else can you get that? With a delicious Built Bar over at Sam's Club, Walmart, or Built.com today. Make sure you tell them that Locked On Eagles sent you. All right, everybody, welcome on in to Locked On Eagles, bringing you back, talking about contract extensions. I'm your host, Gino Camilleri. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day, whether this is your first episode, 101st, 1001st with us here at LOE. We thank you for joining us here. It was a disappointing end to the 2022 season, but the Eagles have to look to 2023 and beyond. And this episode is about the inevitable contract extension for Jalen Hurts. We said that in that first year, he'll probably account for around 25% of the Eagles cap if he were to sign at around $50 million per year. If they could get that cap number to under $60 million per year, you would hope that your quarterback has to account for no more than 1/4 of the total cap in 2024, when that cap number is around $235 million, if it were to continue to go on that $10 million increase per year that it has been since 2013. So what does that mean for this free agent class? Well, it means the Eagles are going to lose some good football players. And by good football players, I mean great football players. The Eagles put together one of the best defenses that we have seen in quite some time. And it's just funny that we're talking about Jonathan Gannon leaving Philadelphia. And it was a bad taste in a lot of our mouths that he had such a bad defensive performance. Well, when you have all of those guys, all of those horses that can run and that are just athletic freaks and set sack records and interception records on the defensive side of the ball, there isn't much leeway. There isn't much room for apologies and say, oh, we'll get him next year. Well, he doesn't have next year. Whoever's coming in next is going to have to do it with some key pillars like Josh Sweat, like Hassan Reddick, like a Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, for example. But a lot of the other pieces, it's a big question mark on that side of the ball. James Bradberry is a free agent this year. Darius Slay has a big cap number coming up going into 2023. At safety, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is a free agent. Marcus Epps is a free agent. Your two linebackers in TJ Edwards and Kyzir White are free agents. Your defensive line, Fletcher Cox is a free agent. Javon Hargrave is a free agent. Brandon Graham is going to have to get a rework deal. Howie Roseman has to do some maneuvering. Will it be easy? Absolutely not. Are they going to lose some good players? Yes. So I went and I took a look to project down the road to try and get just a little glimpse of these comp picks that they'll probably have in 2024 because they're going to lose some good players in 2023. Howie Roseman in his press conference today even said that in 2024 they have those comp picks to look forward to. So if you go down the list, you have James Bradberry, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Javon Hargrave, Isaac Seumalo, Fletcher Cox, TJ Edwards, Kyzir White, Miles Sanders, Gardner Minshew, Marcus Epps. You could continue to go down that list and add some notable free agents, but these are the key guys. If you look at this list and try and project out what they're going to get, you more than likely have a chance to get a third-round comp pick, a fourth-round comp pick, a sixth, and a seventh. And that would be plausible because if you look at it, you're probably going to lose one of James Bradberry and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who are both probably set to make north of $15 million, which would account for a third-round comp pick. Let's say you lose James Bradberry. Between Hargrave and Seumalo, those guys will probably sign anywhere between 9 to 12 to maybe even $13 million. Let's say that gets you a fourth-round comp pick, and you're able to keep Javon Hargrave. Well, Isaac Seumalo should reap you a fourth-round comp pick. In terms of fifth-rounders, between Fletcher Cox, TJ Edwards, let's say Kyzir White, and Miles Sanders, you're bound to at least get 1 to 2 of those guys to get you a comp pick. And then Gardner Minshew and Marcus Epps, the quarterback market and the way Marcus Epps has played, let's say you lose one of those guys. Let's say you get 4 in total. You could have 12 to 13 picks in 2024, but in 2023, you only have 6 as it stands. You have the Eagles first, the Saints first, Eagles second, Eagles third, Texans seventh, and Eagles seventh. You're going to have to nail 2024 and beyond, but you're going to have to get those comp picks by signing the key free agents and not bringing in additional free agents at those positions. So it's going to be a key balance of not bringing in too many free agents to cancel out those comp picks and also nailing those premier picks that you have this year and next year, where you have the Eagles' first-round pick and a second-round pick from the Saints and your second-round pick next year, potentially a comp pick in the third round on top of your third-round comp pick as well. You're going to have to get it right. So let's say they walk away, they're able to keep Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Javon Hargrave, TJ Edwards, Marcus Epps, and then a low-level deal for Fletcher Cox. that means you're still losing James Bradbury. You're still losing Isaac Seumalo, who started now multiple Super Bowls for you. You're going to lose Kyzir White, Miles Sanders, who is your lead rusher, and Gardner Minshew, who is a premier position in this Eagles organization as a backup quarterback. That is a lot to replace. Can the Eagles do it all in one offseason? Probably not. But they have already gotten a head start on what they have done in the past. On some of those draft picks in the last draft that they had last year, the draft that they had the year before that. A lot of those guys are going to have to step up to the plate because when your quarterback goes from 2% of your total cap number to 25% of your total cap number within 2 seasons, some things are going to have to change. You're going to lose a lot of talent on this team, and there's no other way to say it. The Eagles might not be as good as they are moving forward, but you have to hope Howie Roseman doesn't fall into the same trap that he fell into post-2017, where he had a lot of those Band-Aid signings. He didn't have a great core moving forward, and hopefully this time those wrongs are righted. We're going to continue to get into that roadmap to finish up this edition of Locked On Eagles. Free agency is coming up in just about a month. The draft is about 2 months away. The Philadelphia Eagles are going to see a lot of turnover from that Super Bowl roster. But before we get into that, we have a message from our friends over at FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Eagles podcast and the entire Locked On Podcast Network. We're midway through the NBA season, and it is a perfect time to download FanDuel today, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. So you either win and get your money, or you lose and get your money. How could that be any better? I mean, this is a win-win deal to the fullest extent. Go on your phone today, download the FanDuel Sportsbook app, or go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. We just got done with the NFL season. We're going right into the NBA. You have MLB coming up. You have all the UFC action. You have soccer going on at all times. FanDuel has everything you can imagine. It is the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Eagles podcast, the entire Locked On Podcast Network, and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We thank them for being the official sportsbook here at the Locked On Eagles podcast. All right, everybody, finishing up the Jalen Hurts contract extension edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. This is just a forecast. I'm sure we will get into the exact specifics when that day comes. Join us here Monday through Friday as we are tuning in to give you all the news, insights, and opinions 5 days a week, now for 6 seasons running. I'm Gino Camilleri. Find my co-host at Lou DiBiase as well on Twitter at DiBiaseLOE. Find me at GC24_football. Find the mothership at Locked On Birds. And you found us wherever you got your podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. Finishing up this show, Jalen Hurts. We know he's going to be expensive, but is it worth it? Is all this money worth paying Jalen Hurts? Let's take a step back. Carson Wentz. At the time, he got the most guaranteed money of a quarterback. He got quite the deal. He was making around $36 million per year, which, sheesh, at this rate, that is a steal. But the Eagles invested a lot of money into a player that they had expected to be the franchise quarterback moving forward. Was he? Did he turn out to be? I think the question is clear and simple. No, he did not. Jalen Hurts, he's going to get a lot more money than Carson Wentz ever got. In fact, he's probably going to be the highest paid quarterback until the next guy gets paid. But he is going to be, especially after that Super Bowl performance, to cap off the already historic season that he put out there in 2022 and 2023. The leadership and what he is going to bring as the face of a franchise is worth all of that money and more. To know that you have a guy that is a genuine leader, that people genuinely buy into, that people within the city genuinely respect, that people in the organization genuinely respect, that guys want to come here and play with Jalen Hurts. A.J. Brown wanted to come here. They were best friends. They are best friends. Look at the results. Devontae Smith, a great player he played with at Alabama, comes to Philadelphia. Look at the results. Look at what this offensive line has been able to do with Jalen Hurts. Look at what Jalen Hurts has been able to do with the offensive line. Look at the cohesion between Nick Sirianni and Jalen. If you don't think Jalen is going to have an instrumental impact on who is going to be the play caller and the offensive coordinator moving forward, you don't know Jeffrey Lurie and you don't know Howie Roseman on how much they believe in tying a coach to a player. They thought they had it with Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson, but shame on them. They got fooled once. I don't believe they'll get fooled again. There's a lot of talk about Brian Johnson being the key guy, the next man up to be the offensive play caller for the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, why is that? Brian Johnson has known Jalen Hurts since he's 4 years old. Jalen Hurts is going to be the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles, whether you like it or not. And a lot of people, we might not have liked it at the time he was picked 53rd overall. But boy, oh boy, is 53rd overall for a franchise quarterback quite the deal. And in the long run, does paying a quarterback hurt your team? Yes, of course. We always say that the rookie quarterback contract is the best asset in all of football. When you could pay a guy who makes the most impact, a guy who touches the ball every single play, just about 2% of your overall salary cap, you could bring in premier players. But when you have to pay him 25% of said salary cap, it's going to be a lot more difficult. But if you're going to trust a guy to elevate those guys around him, do the things that Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and the Aaron Rodgers and the Russell Wilsons have been paid to do in the past, and some for the present, and just wait until those guys get paid for the future, that will look like a bargain in 2 years from now. $50 million per for a quarterback with all these guys that are going to get contracts, it's going to look like an absolute bargain. And when you find a guy, you cannot let that guy go. I don't think there is an upgrade for Jalen Hurts. And even if there is, I don't want to take a chance on it after I saw what I saw in this past season. He's worth $50 million all day long. Howie Roseman, this is the time you make your money. This is the time you prove why you were voted Executive of the Year. When things are going great, that's all good and dandy. But when things get a little tough and adversity hits and you have constraints on you, how do you respond? Because the last go around, we saw what happened post 2017. We saw what happened post Carson Wentz contract extension. Can he fix it this time around? I absolutely believe so. He has the staff in place. He supports the personnel department as much as any personnel department in the league. People give back to the Philadelphia Eagles by putting in a lot of work in the offseason. These scouts behind the scenes. The work doesn't pay off for 2 to 3 years down the road, but when you make draft picks like Josh Sweat and Jordan Mailata, and you hit on the Jason Kelce's of old, and you're able to keep the Lane Johnsons and the Fletcher Coxes, that allows you, when you have this big quarterback contract, to keep these young premier players on lesser deals while still keeping your core foundation on their second and third contracts and creating this cycle that is sustainable. Because once you get into this cycle where you bring in good players, the older guys will eventually age out, but they'll still give you compensatory picks. And those younger guys that you draft will inevitably come in for cheaper, replace that labor, do it maybe even better. You can get into one of these cycles like the New England Patriots got in the early 2000s, where it was just a self-sustaining organism that was this franchise, where just more and more talent would come in. But they couldn't sign all this talent because they had Tom Brady's contract extension, because they extended all these core pieces. But they had their core and they were able to add on. But you can't have a core without the one core piece. That's quarterback. Sign Jalen Hurts, and let the rest fall into place. I don't think it goes deeper than that. You're going to have to sign him. He's going to count for 25% of the salary cap in year one. But hey, by year 5 and 6, when he's only around 20% of the cap and the cap continues to rise, that's when it'll pay off. That's when that bargain will pay off. Get the deal done now. Sign quarterback 1. Let's see if he could get you to the promised land. Once again, that'll do it for us here at Locked On Eagles. Thank you for tuning in. Once again, whether this is your first, 101st, 1001st show with us here at LOE, we thank you for making it your first listen each and every day. Thank you for tuning in to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. You know where to find us. We're available and free wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. Make sure you give us a 5-star review. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment as well. We're always interacting on Twitter. Find myself at GC24_football on Twitter. Find my co-host at DiBiase-LOE. Find the mothership at Locked On Birds. We're doing shows 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Tune in for your latest news, insights, and opinions, all here at Locked On Eagles. We thank you for making it your first listen each and every day. And as always, go Birds and fly Eagles fly.